It started as an ordinary live interview broadcasted from London to millions of viewers around the world. The BBC morning show had invited a Filipino guest, a young linguist named Maria Santos, to talk about how English is used differently in Asian countries. What nobody expected was that the interview would turn into one of the most embarrassing moments in BBC history, and that the reporter who thought he was clever would be the one who got schooled live on air. The moment began innocently enough. The BBC reporter, a tall British man named Oliver Grant, introduced Maria with a polite smile. Joining us today from Manila is Maria Santos, a linguist who studies the way English has evolved in Southeast Asia. He said, "Good morning, Maria." Maria smiled and replied, "Good morning, sir. It's a pleasure to be here." But as soon as she spoke, Oliver raised an eyebrow. He gave a little smirk that didn't go unnoticed by viewers. "I must say, Maria," he said in a slightly mocking tone, "your English is quite interesting." The way he said it made it clear that interesting wasn't a compliment. The live audience chuckled softly, but Maria kept her composure. She smiled and said, "Thank you, sir. I studied English since I was a child. It's one of our national languages." Oliver leaned back, pretending to be impressed. "Oh yes, I've heard that. But tell me, do Filipinos speak English every day? I mean, real English or just a Filipino version of it?" The question hung in the air, sharp and condescending. The producers in the control room froze. They knew the tone was disrespectful, but it was live television. They couldn't cut it. Maria, however, didn't flinch. "Well," she said calmly, "English in the Philippines is not just a version. It's part of who we are. In fact, many Filipinos learn English before they even start school. We use it in universities, in government, in business, and in daily life. You could say we live in English and Filipino at the same time." Oliver chuckled again. "That's cute. But surely it's not the same as native English, is it? I mean, your pronunciation, your expressions, they're different." The way he said different sounded more like wrong, but Maria still didn't lose her smile. Instead, she asked him, "May I ask, sir, what you mean by real English? Because from where I stand, there isn't just one English. There's British English, American English, Australian English, Indian English, even Nigerian English. Wouldn't you agree?" The studio went quiet for a moment. Oliver cleared his throat. "Well, yes, but the BBC uses the standard form." "And who decided what standard?" Maria asked, still smiling. "Was it the British Empire?" The audience gasped slightly. Oliver tried to laugh it off. "You're quite bold, Maria." "I'm just being honest," she replied. Then she continued, "The funny thing about language is that it evolves. The same way British English borrowed words from French, Latin, and even Hindi, Filipino English has evolved to fit our culture and reality. It doesn't make it less valid. It just makes it ours." Oliver tried to regain control. "But you do agree that the Queen's English is the gold standard of proper English?" "Actually," Maria said, "many young British people don't even speak like the Queen anymore. In fact, most of your viewers probably don't use that kind of English at all." The audience laughed. Oliver forced a smile. "Good point," he said, but his tone was tight. Maria went on. "In the Philippines, English isn't just for academics. Taxi drivers, street vendors, and farmers can all speak it in their own way. That's the beauty of it. It connects people from all walks of life. We may pronounce things differently, but we understand each other perfectly. Isn't that what language is for?" The chat section of the BBC live stream began flooding with comments. Viewers from around the world were praising Maria's calmness and wit. Filipinos across social media started sharing clips of the interview with captions like, "Filipino pride," and "We speak English with confidence, not apology."
But Oliver still wasn't ready to give up. "More than that," Maria replied. "It's living proof of how English has become global. You can't call it wrong just because it doesn't sound British. That's like saying British English is wrong because it doesn't sound like American." Oliver blinked. "That's an interesting comparison." Maria nodded. "Language belongs to those who speak it. And if over 100 million Filipinos use English daily, that's not a mistake." Oliver looked flustered, shuffling his notes. "Well, that's quite an argument. You make it sound like English is no longer owned by the English." "It's not," Maria said. "It never was. It belongs to everyone who uses it to express themselves." The cameras zoomed in on her face as she spoke, calm, intelligent, and confident. It was the kind of moment that gives viewers chills. Later that day, clips of the interview went viral on TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. Millions of people shared the video, praising how Maria handled the reporter with grace and intelligence. Even some British viewers commented things like, "She's right." But what really shocked everyone was what happened next. The BBC's official Twitter account posted a short message. "We celebrate diversity in language." Today's conversation with Maria Santos reminds us that English belongs to all who speak it. Oliver himself issued a public apology the next day. "I've learned something valuable," he said on air, "and I was wrong to underestimate how beautifully Filipinos use it." The apology spread almost as fast as the original clip. Maria, meanwhile, became an overnight sensation. Universities invited her to speak about linguistic diversity. She even received messages from people in Africa, India, and the Caribbean thanking her for defending the idea that English can be spoken in many ways and still be correct. A few weeks later, Maria was invited back to the BBC, but this time not as a guest to be questioned, but as a special commentator.
When she appeared again, Oliver greeted her with genuine respect. "Welcome back, Maria. It's an honor to have you." "Thank you, sir," she replied, smiling as always. This time the tone was different. It was warm, equal, and full of admiration. The conversation that followed wasn't about mockery anymore. It was about understanding, growth, and respect. Oliver even admitted on air that he had rewatched their previous interview several times. "I realized," he said, "that you didn't just defend Filipino English. You reminded us what communication is truly about. Connection." Maria nodded. "Exactly. Language isn't about who sounds more proper. It's about who makes people feel understood. And Filipinos have mastered that." The studio audience clapped again, but this time with deeper appreciation. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was a lesson. Back home in the Philippines, people gathered in cafes, offices, and classrooms to watch the replay. Teachers showed it to their students, saying, "This is how you stand your ground with humility and intelligence." And the young Filipinos who once felt insecure about their accent began to feel proud. They realized that speaking English with a Filipino accent wasn't a weakness. It was a mark of their identity, their global reach, and their adaptability. In fact, one tweet perfectly captured the mood. "We may not sound British, but our English speaks from the heart." That tweet alone got over 1 million likes. Over time, Maria's story became a symbol of confidence for non-native English speakers everywhere. In interviews, she often said, "Never let anyone tell you your English is wrong just because it sounds different. The goal of language is to connect, not to compete." Her words spread across continents, translated into different languages. Students quoted her in essays. News anchors mentioned her as an example of cultural pride. Even English teachers in the UK began using her interview as teaching material to show how English has diversified across the world. Months later, Maria was invited to give a TED Talk titled "The English That Belongs to Everyone." The hall was packed and millions watched online. She began her speech by recalling that BBC interview and said, "That day I learned that being mocked can be an opportunity if you respond with truth and grace." She paused and smiled. "And maybe that's what being Filipino is all about. We don't fight with anger. We fight with brilliance and kindness." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Meanwhile, Oliver, who sat in the front row, was the first to stand and clap. When the talk ended, he approached her backstage and said, "Maria, you've changed the way I see English and the world." She smiled softly. "That's what language is supposed to do, sir. It's supposed to change how we see each other." The story of Maria and the BBC reporter became a modern legend online. People continued sharing it as a reminder that respect matters more than accent, and that knowledge, when spoken with humility, can silence arrogance. Years later, whenever someone mocked a Filipino for their English, someone else would always reply, "Careful, remember what happened to that BBC reporter?" And just like that, a single live interview that began with mockery turned into a powerful lesson heard across the world. A lesson that said you don't need a British accent to speak English with intelligence. You just need confidence, respect, and a voice that speaks truth. Because in the end, language doesn't belong to the few who invented it. It belongs to the many who keep it alive. And that day, live on air, the BBC and the whole world finally understood.